Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome back to the table of many voices of the new European Bauhaus project of Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore, entitled NEB Builds Community Aesthetics, that aims at highlighting the key role of beauty and arts, key role as resource for building community relationships and inclusion, key role as a quality generating experience, key role as dialogue between the built environment and the ecosystems. Our first multipolar conversation of last week focused on building inclusion through the experience of beauty. It was coordinated by Professor Ruggero Eugeni and guested a group of international scholars and artists who shared new perspectives on how visual and media arts can contribute to build a sustainable and beautiful inclusiveness within urban public spaces. Today, our new exploration leads us to this second multipolar conversation that again offers new perspectives, namely on building a multi-ethnic, climate-neutral society. It will be led by Professor Ilaria Beretta, Research Area Coordinator of ASA, Università Cattolica Graduate School for Environmental Studies. I wish you a pleasurable, a generative and beautiful experience today. Ilaria, the floor is yours and of your quite distinguished guests. Thanks for your kind attention.
Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for being here with us. My name is Ilaria Beretta. I'm here to coordinate this multipolar conversation. In this regard, I'd like to thank Professor Olivares, Forti, and all the other professors to allow me to participate in this conference, this very beautiful initiative that there will be plenty of activities till June 2022. Just a couple of words about my presentation, about our multipolar conversation, also called Building a Multi-Ethnic Climate Neutral Society. We'll talk about climate neutrality, about circular economy. But I'd like to explain that both they normally don't coincide. And what do I mean by saying that? That means that certain decisions could be taken in the industrial area, for example. Thereby, certain recycling systems, which are super efficient, could be adopted. But on the same time, they could also contribute to climate change. In this case, we can talk about circular economy. In fact, we will hear our guests talking about different aspects that don't contribute to climate change. We've been hearing about climate change, carbon neutrality. We know that the Green Deal put carbon neutrality in the center. And we also know that the European Commission proposed an action plan, which is for in February this year. But I'm also talking about our resilience and recovery plan that dedicates the component 1, mission 2, to the theme of the circular economy. Nevertheless, the problem is that we hear very often talking about circularity from a productive point of view. So we only associate circularity with eco-innovation. We really lack a deep reflection about circularity and in the context of civil society. The European Union is asking us to make efforts to change our attitudes, to change our habits. We are used to showing what we have, showing our possessions, comparing ourselves to other people, to distance ourselves from other people, compared to what we do. And the European Union asks. What the European Union is asking us is to find different ways of living. It's asking us to use, to recycle, to reuse waste, and it's an incredible change. We are really not used to these change and these new aspects. Circular economy also means going back to our sustainable old traditions. And we are here today with our guests that I'd like to thank because they accepted our invite. I would like them to talk about their memories, to talk about their family, their traditions, the things that society and their families used to tell them about sustainability in their countries. We need to remember that the European Union is asking us to completely change our habits. We need to reach social cohesion. And this social cohesion definitely needs to be connected with knowledge of other cultures, sustainability. Who are the people here? Who are the people that will talk today? We have Awakana. She was born in Mauritania, but she was grown in Senegal. She's been here in Italy since 2005. She got her degree in Senegal in marketing. At the moment, she's one of our students, and she studies social sciences. We have also Gabriela Palade. She's a Romanian person. She has been here for almost 20 years. She got her degree in Bucharest in geography, and she is a counselor at school. We also have Simone Silva. She's Brazilian. She's been here in Italy since 1991. She got her degree in Brazil in social sciences. And she got a similar degree in Trento. She's a cultural mediator, interpreter, and translator. Last but not least, I would like to present Iyas Ashkar. He's Palestinian. He's been here in Italy for 20 years. He has a degree in medicine, and he loves defining himself as an activist and a promoter of the Palestinian culture. At this point, I'd like to give the floor to my guests. And I'd like to give the floor, first of all, to Gabriela. I'd like to ask them to give us a little insight about their countries and to give us some details about the countries, their traditions, and so on and so forth. Thank you, Gabriela. Thank you, Ilaria. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity, for this invitation, and I'm happy to talk about my country and my traditions. I come from Romania. It's in the south part of Europe. It borders the Black Sea. It's a quite big country. It's the 12th country amongst the countries in Europe. Concerning size, it's a very beautiful country. There are a lot of mountain ranges in the country. In the central part, we have the Transylvania. We also have a lot of mountain ranges there. And on the external part, we have many hills and plains that are more or less 30% of the surface of Romania. And soil fertility is one of the main features of Romania. One of the most beautiful elements is the Danube River, which is the second river in Europe. And it's really long, and a big part of the Danube River actually is in this country, in my country. It also ends in the sea, of course, and I'm talking about and the last part of the river is also a very important part, very important for the biosphere and for the UNESCO. Concerning language, concerning the capital city, it's Bucharest. It's the southern part of the country. It's a very important part of the country. I'd like to make you notice an historical fact. Romania, there was a communist regime in Romania. This was a totalitarian regime that, and in other countries, this wasn't so bad. The situation wasn't so bad. In Romania, we had a revolution in order to conquer freedom and to end this regime. The revolution ended with many victims, and the process of the president, Ceausescu, that was in power since 1974, who was condemned and killed on the day of Christmas. This was a very shocking and very traumatic event for Romania. In fact, the Orthodox religion is it's founded on Orthodox religion. Thank you, Gabriela. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for talking about my country. I come from Mauritania. I'm a refugee. Me and my family have been living here. I know Senegal more compared to Mauritania. Senegal is part of the western part of Africa. The climate is, the weather is tropical, so tropical weather with a dry and with a humid. There is both dry and humid weather. We have 2.6 inhabitants living in the capital, Dakar. We have 14 regions. Me and my family have been living in one of the regions called Kaolack. Kaolack is in the southern part of the capital. And it's also called, and it's also a port, a harbor. It's the economy is based on agriculture as well as on salt that we sell in the other parts of the country. What am I talking about? Senegal is a country called De la Teranga because it's a very welcoming country. It's a very touristic country too. And the very first people who conquered our country were French people. I think Senegal is a quite stable country, and I like Senegal. Thank you. Thank you, Awa. Could you please turn off the microphone? Good evening. I'm really honored of being here today and talking about Brazil and circular economy in Brazil. Brazil is the biggest country in America and the 5th country in the world concerning size. We only have Canada, Russia, China, and United States who are come before that. We have concerning the size of the country. The density of the population is quite reduced, only 25 inhabitants per square kilometer. The name Brazil, just a few people know that, is the Federal Republic of Brazil. The name Brazil comes from a tree that the Portuguese settler found as first natural source, because Brazil was a country in which settlers were really interested in exporting what they found into other countries. And it's called pau-brasil because in its trunk there was the color of the trunk was red, and it was used in the textile industry, and it was also used as food to make the fire. Brazil is divided into 5 macro regions. In the eastern, southern, central part, and the north is in the northern part. I come from the northern part of Brazil. It's a quite big part of Brazil, and we can say that the size makes the country quite hard to control and to protect. We also need to protect our main forest. We have more than 700,000 kilometers of coastline, and we border all of the countries of Latin America except Chile and Ecuador. We're a very rich country. We are an economic power. We are at the 8th. Concerning the gross internal product, we are quite rich. Thereby, we are rich and poor on the same time. Why am I saying that? Because the richness produced in this country is not equally distributed it's not equally distributed. So Brazil is a very beautiful country. I invite all of you to know Brazil, but it's a country which is filled with there are plenty of problems. The favelas, we have citizens who've fled from the countryside and fill the city with problems, not because they are bad, not because they represent a problem, but because we're talking about the issues in the country, the social issues. Thank you very much, Simone.
Okay, thank you so much for your invitation. I come from Palestinian family. We are many of us in our family, 6 siblings. Only 2 of us live abroad, whereas all the others are back in Palestine. The Palestinian people live in very limited urban spaces. They are really limited with borders, and there's no continuity. There's no territorial or geographical continuity. Among the towns we border with Israeli colonies, which are outside the Palestinian territory. We also have a wall that was purposely built to partition and to separate the communities, so Palestinians themselves have been cut out from their own resources. That's in terms of farming, agriculture, etc. Access to the farming areas, which is a historical resource for Palestinians, is under the control of the Israelis and even the water resources are under a very limiting political control. The towns are governed by the Palestinian authorities, who employ 300,000 employees. That's 300,000 families, Palestinian families, depend on the Palestinian National Authority, and these are funded by the European Union and other international organizations. What I would like to stress in this case is that the people's will doesn't really matter. We have very little decision-making power in our hands. The Palestinian market is open to import from all over the world, so all products can enter the Palestinian markets, but the Palestinian products are not equally free for exportation abroad. So we don't have the same, it's a very unbalanced trade situation. So we have a situation where we are not up to pace with what's happening in the international market as far as our internal products are concerned. It's actually stifled by an unbalanced situation.
To tell us a bit more about your sustainable traditions in your country. Just, also talking about the 5 R's of circular economy: reducing, reusing, repairing, recycling, and refurbishing. Please, Gabriela, we're listening. Thank you. I'd like to go back to my previous speech. The fact that I was born and grown during communist times in Romania, and this is very important. I'd like to remind you about remind myself also about certain aspects of my childhood. And my generation was born with principles that we today call circular economy. Since there was a lot of food scarcity in my country, our education, what we were told to do was basically using things, recycling things too, and repairing our things. Our clothes, our toys. Thereby, we didn't waste food or objects at all. I was born in a family of farmers. I have 3 sisters. I'm the younger, and I was born with the clothes that my sisters used to wear. For example, my backpack, my shoes. Most of my things belonged to them. So we tried all the time to take care of things and to store our things. I remember that at school, certain hours were dedicated to manual works. Concerning females, we used to do our stuff, and boys used to do other things with corn, for example, and building stuff with corn. We tried to invent and to build certain toys with natural materials that we found, like, for example, little branches, pieces of textiles, the things we had at home. So we were having a lot of fun, and it was a really creative activity and process. So I remember that my mother, amongst our habits, we were farmers, as I said, during winter, had a loom. And she used to build carpets that we, in order to cover the floor in our house, or, for example, bed sheets. made with coming from the sheep. So with another memory I have is that my grandmother used to create soap, to produce soap that was used for the body, for the house. In order to produce food, she used to produce that in April, and she used to pick up all the things that she found in the kitchen, and aside from the necessary ingredients to produce it, she also added a little bit of absinthe. And she used to explain me that she added that plant because it gave that green color to the soap, and also because it's absinthe is very well known for its antiseptic properties. This is just one example to show how in Romania picking up herbs, phytotherapy are really popular. I'd like also to tell you more about a Romanian pharmacist who's 94 years old, and he dedicated his whole life to the study of plants. By traveling the world, he wrote many books, and is also representative of the Academia of Medical Sciences in Romania. Concerning the cuisine and the traditions, the culinary traditions in my country, I'd like to tell you that 44% of the population lives in the rural areas. So nowadays, the farmer has is really bonded to the land, nature, the simplicity of life, the simple things in life. And every farmer has a minimum of resources to live and survive. There's a small part of land that they farm just to, they exploit a part of the land to sustain their families, or they also feed the animals and, at least some couple of chickens or cows are bred. So there's a there's a connection between people living in the countryside and in the city. They're also used to sharing, culinary traditions, and that's a very particular and unique relationship. Nowadays, in our society, it's very common that women prepare certain products. I'm talking about vegetables with different, and they preserve them. For example, I'd like to mention one of those modalities. They normally store lettuce. They preserve lettuce with a very ancient method. It's when they put lettuce in brine, and through fermentation, it's considered to have important properties that prevent, prevent cancer, for example. And it's used to make also traditional dishes. One of them is called sarmale. We could say many things, plenty of things about traditions and cultures in our country. Perhaps we could talk about that later on in a different event. Since Christmas is coming, I'd like to remind you of the fact that our festivities, our traditions are very connected with, also with Christmas. We celebrate, of course, Christmas, and there are a lot of traditions that of course, differ according to the region. We also use pork, for example, for the festivities. Adults and children are also dressed with folk clothes, traditional clothes. And many people bring the message of joy and and they wish, they do these celebrations in the city. Thank you very much, Gabriela. I think it's very, very interesting, So I would like now to, we'd like now to talk about, Senegal with Awa. I'd like also to hear about the things that people used to tell you. What people your family used to tell you. Yeah, people told me that Senegal is 90% of the population is, are represented by Muslims. It's represented by Muslims. There are also Catholics, and people from Senegal can also have 4 wives, up to 4 wives. Can you imagine having 4 wives in one house? Farming is the main industry there, and children are not sent to school because they need to work. They need to help the family. Peanuts and millet are also cultivated, and all these products are used for the family. Sometimes those products are also sold on the market at the market. Sometimes the wheat is also cultivated, and I'm quite young. I lived in the generation of consumption that this didn't happen to my mother and my grandmother, of course, because they, for example, drinkable water didn't exist. They needed to go through. They need to go to the wells and take the water, and where there are also some containers made by craftsmen that were used especially to go and collect water. We couldn't waste water. They couldn't waste water at all since they are Muslims. They need to make a series of rituals to. They couldn't waste water at all. They couldn't have shoes, for example. Men used to use caoutchouc, and they used to use Indian rubber to produce shoes. But when some shoes got broken, if a pair of shoes got broken, then they used to go to a person that fixed that, and thanks to that person, they could use those shoes for another 6 years. Concerning clothes, there were 2 festivities since they're Muslims. They were Muslims. There were the Jew festivity, when God said to Abraham to kill his only child to check if he believed in him. When Abraham was almost killing him, Gabriel, the angel, then brought the mutton, and this is our festivity. There was a dress, a very very beautiful dress that normally families couldn't buy, and yeah, that's how they lived. Concerning food, is mutton. Was killed since and normally the man used to take 1 mutton, and the meat that they didn't use, since they didn't have fridges, was cut into small pieces and put on the sun and with salt. These constituted an important resource for the whole year. They could eat for the whole year thanks to this aspect. So that's what they used to do. Concerning the skin of the mutton, it was used for building drums. The drum. The skin was used to. It was a part of the drum. They used to, There were particular things and traditions that were related to the drum. For example, when somebody died, if somebody died, they used the drum. And they also had other traditions like burying people, and or men, for example, used to go at 3 at night, 3 a.m. to the cemetery and bury a person. So they didn't have. I'd like to say that in the past and in the present, nowadays, we can really buy a lot of things. I could send a second-hand fridge to my mother, because, and I think this is very interesting, because, for example, the third president was before the last one. He made regulations about cars and about pollution, and this president said no. We have to make more regulations and improve, and really fight pollution. So also pollution is another aspect that I think is quite relevant in Senegal. I think you told me something about salt or fish. Yes, fresh fish used to be sent to the European countries. We eat more dry fish, for example. It used to be cooked by women. People used to fish, and when they come back, in order to preserve fish, since it's not possible to eat it all, what remained was again dried with salt, and it was really the same as peanuts and other products. Senegal, in the population in Senegal, eats a lot of rice. Unfortunately, people don't like this rice. Concerning, there is a rice that is produced with peanuts and with fish here. It's also possible to cook rice with meat. Peanuts can also be used for the animals, for example, to feed the animals, or as she said, for example, houses are also made with some products, so they are used. Thank you so much for diving deep into the world and the culture in Senegal. So, Simone, please tell us a bit more about Brazilian traditions. Thank you. While Gabriela was speaking, I thought that something interesting used to happen, in my house. I thought I wanted to speak about the local projects in my city and circular economy, but I think it's interesting. It would be interesting if I started to talk about, other aspects. My mother and my grandmother, in particular my grandmother, she was an immigrant. She lived, she was an indigenous woman, and she went to live in the city. She had 20 children. So she had to, find solutions to save money, to save products. Since my grandfather had some shops in the city, but she needed really to transmit these educations about sobriety, about living with just a couple of things and feeling happy. She had to teach that to us. And I remember when we were sitting, when we were eating together, she told us those things. And she said to us, "You don't need to eat too much. Why do you have to waste food?" So I will always remember about these aspects, and that's why here in Italy I never wanted to waste food. I think it's very important to educate our children and to learn, to really stop throwing things away. And we need to teach that to our children when they're really young, at a very young age. That way, we could then, we could really transmit that knowledge to our future generations. I thought this could be an important consideration. Talking about the household in Brazil, in every house we use a particular pen. Many friends of mine don't understand this tradition. We use that because it takes a lot of time to prepare our food. For example, rice or beans, dry beans. It takes a lot of time to cook them. So many women in their houses know how to use this particular pan. It's also a way to save gas in the kitchen. Since I used to live in a urban city, in a urban area, my memories reflect that reality. I lived in the northeastern part of Brazil with 4 million inhabitants. So we're talking about a city that is very rich. It's also a city with plenty of problems. And Brazil, and this is of course, it affects every area of Brazil, is a problem with a high rate of inequality, and there are a lot of problems in the urban areas. We have poor and rich people and living in the favelas. So I remember when I was a kid, since I used to go to school to the city center, there were people who were carrying some trays, wooden trays, sometimes homemade trays. And I stopped and I started observing them. And these people were really poor people. They are the so-called catadores de lixo in Brazil. So they basically pick up trash. They are not people who rely, who are actually, hired from the government, but they're people who are actually very committed, to doing such things. I've been very respectful towards these people because they clean the city basically from the morning. So they're quite, it's not a legal work, it's not a legal job, but they do that. As I said, since the government doesn't give jobs doesn't provide them with with the right job, and they can't find better conditions, living conditions, they understood they could do something with that, and they could earn from picking up the trash. There is something that I never liked in Brazil. These people seem to be invisible, in the eyes of people who were instead rich. Since they're humble, they don't have a high level of instructions, they looked invisible. instead, I really respect them for their job, for what they do environmentally. They really reuse the objects that can be reused and transformed into different stuff, different objects. Therefore, the catadores de lixo in the favelas are, according to me, a very, very interesting reality, and they have a lot to teach to the people. Recently, there were a few projects, and a few projects have been implemented. Few initiatives have been created, like an application. You can subscribe. You can use that application with. And it's possible to tell which kind of trash can be picked up and recycled. So it's this way. If it's also possible, to call these people in case inhabitants don't have the possibility to go to the landfill and to throw the trash away. So technological innovation represents an important aspect, and really, you have to think that Brazil is under the equator, so it's the weather is really warm, and people are really going around in the city looking for something that they can't find. With this system, thanks to this program, they can work more and in a more efficient way, and they manage to clean the city. The ideal situation would be, no trash around, nothing to pick up. I think this is a utopia. It's not possible in our society. But something more about, there's another initiative in the city center, which is about bike sharing. Those guys, some guys thought that in many flats of the middle class, there were some bicycles that were basically unused. Rich people use them just once per week on Sunday. So they thought we could make a campaign. We could actually pick up, a great amount of unused bicycle, and bring them where, it was where people really needed them. Sometimes, for poor people, using a bicycle is really a miracle. Thereby, this became a democratic way to, bring children to the school, to go to the supermarket for these poor families. Another interesting aspect is that those two social classes that before were living apart, they were disconnected. Thanks to this project, they actually started, fostering social inclusion and helping the the most vulnerable people. The so-called volta da roda, in Italian, fai circolare, is not only about helping people and giving them new bicycles. It's also about promoting social inclusion. Thank you so much, Simone, for these wonderful projects that you talked about. I'd like to give the floor to Iyas for the last.
Okay, I'll try to be as short as possible. Like I mentioned previously, our life has always been, we've always had a lot of instability, financially speaking, economically speaking, so we had to adopt some mechanisms, some practices, socio-economical practices. I vividly remember our homes full of tins, cans, and many things preserved. So we also had this issue about preserving yogurt, drying it, and preserving it in form of white powder. I remember our markets, we didn't have many products. We had many artisans with many workshops that I no longer see that often today. We don't have the shoemaker, the shoe repairer, we don't have the tailor. That was normal back then. It was the most natural thing that one could do. It was about sharing clothes. I even wore jerseys or t-shirts from an uncle who had lived 20 years before me. So this idea of sharing or not throwing anything away was really fanatic in some ways, I would dare say. It was really incredible. I think it was all attempt, do anything in your power not to waste anything or throw anything away. The second thing, there are a couple of things I would like to bring to your attention today as concerns the circular economy. It's not what we mean today. Maybe it's not what you have in mind today, but maybe that's what it was back in the day. For example, let's talk about Palestinian weddings. Palestinian weddings, it's known in Middle East. Our weddings are known to have to be some kind of a mass event with so many guests. And the families of the couple were supposed to offer food to everyone, and the invitation was to everyone, so you could not select. You could invite the entire village, the whole area. So I'm talking about 500, 600 guests, 700 guests. So you had to prepare food for all these people. In this case, chances were you had more people than expected, or maybe you would have prepared abundantly more food than you actually needed. So what would happen is that after the wedding, the parents, friends, siblings, extended family would all line up together, and they would have these cans and they would package all the leftovers. And all these leftovers would be distributed to haphazardly to anyone, randomly to anyone in the town. So this was one of those things that I really remember fondly back in the day. Those are things we used to do, those are our habits, and I would wish this continued up to date. Something else that happens, it's in a more sad period. We had the curfew period. So they are more similar to lockdown, but they were much harsher. Not even a supermarket or a food store could be open. Then we didn't have that time when everyone would crowd there. What would happen is that everyone would enter their homes and see what they had, what you could share and what couldn't be shared. So the main thing was about caring, about not wasting, not buying more than you needed, or maybe taking something away from the market that someone else needed. So if you had 20 kilograms of flour or you had 10 kilograms of meal, you would share them with your neighbor who didn't have it, instead of having your neighbor go to the supermarket to go and get more supplies. So it's not actually the circular economy as we see it today, but in my opinion, I would hope with good policies and above all with a little bit more of political stability, social or economic stability, maybe we'll be able to get things going again in the near future and have a much better future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iyas. Definitely, even though we're not talking about circular economy, we're talking about sharing. We're talking about habits that are very crucial in today's circular economy and the way we conceive our this concept of circular economy. We just, for now, we just ended I ended my, this meeting is over. I really would like to thank our citizens, those 4 citizens of Brescia. We really dived deep into their lives. We commented last couple of days ago with Simone that it's really it's not easy to to find somebody who can tell us more about their traditions. So I hope we managed to tell to teach you a bit more about their cultures. Thank you very much for helping us, for talking about sustainability, and thank you for helping us to build, to give a contribution to society to help society to be more cohesive and more and a better society. So I'd like to end my presentation. Our next meeting will be a Multipolar Conversation that will be held on December the 9th at Museo del Novecento in Milan. It's possible, of course, to listen to the meeting online. The title will be is Building and Beauty to Build an Inclusive and Just Environment. Thank you very much, and I wish you a nice evening.